Good evening, and welcome to the community room here at the Needham Free Public Library. Tonight's program is a little different. We have two authors tonight. We have Gina Vild, who is recently served as Associate Dean and Chief Communications Officer at Harvard Medical School and has held leadership roles in healthcare and government. Today she coaches individuals and small groups on cultivating resilience when facing adversity and consults on brand leadership and crisis management. She also writes 2 columns for Psychology Today, one on resilience and another on happiness, and is currently working on her latest book, Roses in Winter: How to Cultivate Resilience During Difficult Times. We also have Dr. Sanjiv Chopra. He's a hepatologist and professor of medicine at Harvard Medical School, who currently serves as the Marshall Wolf Distinguished Clinician Educator at Brigham and Women's Hospital. Dr. Chopra is also the, editor-in-chief of the hepatology section of the popular electronic textbook, Up to Date, which is regularly consulted by over 1.5 million physicians around the world. In addition to more than 170 published pieces, he has also written many books on medicine, leadership, and other topics, including 4 books that he published during the pandemic. We're honored to have both of them speaking with us tonight. And doing the interview is Matt Robinson, who has been a professional writer, editor, and educator for over 30 years, in which time he has published thousands of pieces all over the world and helped hundreds of students prepare for their own careers. Currently, Matt is teaching writing and entrepreneurial skills at the Norfolk County Sheriff's Office, interviewing area authors on his show, The Writer's Block, and also here and contributing food-related pieces to WBZ Radio, and also teaching boxing at PEX in Needham. In addition to publishing thousands of articles on a wide range of topics and providing content and consulting services to entrepreneurs and organizations, he's also the author of Lions, Tigers, and Bulldogs, and an official guide to the legends and lore of the Ivy League, and is currently working on a book about percussion and world culture. So without further ado, let us get started.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Thank you to our esteemed guests. It's a pleasure. This is our first, my first dual interview, so we're all kind of learning as we go here. So let's set context for the discussion. How do you define life purpose, and how did each of you respectively find your own?
So can I first ask, thank you for having us here. Sanjiv and I are thrilled. We had given many talks together, but have not, and since before COVID, been together. We've been giving individual talks, so this is really fun. Can I ask first, who here feels they know their purpose? Just a show of hands. Okay, so there's opportunity to think about this and to grow. So I think about purpose as an alignment of head and heart. Well, you know you're doing something that is intellectually fulfilling, but it also feeds your heart. And it's really the answer to the why of your life. And Sanjiv and I have talked a lot about how do you find your purpose, and there are many ways to do that. And I'll let you talk about the cards, because you do that so well. And when you're thinking about your purpose, one of the greatest ways to do it is write your eulogy. And think about, what is it that you want to be remembered for? And is it a quest for more things? Is it a quest for money? Is it about having given back? Are you writing about someone who has seen the world from the perspective of me or of we? And you know you will find your purpose if you answer that question of why, and when you write that eulogy for yourself, it feels fulfilling and you feel really good about it.
So I'm also going to start by asking a question. How many of you are happy? Can you raise your hands? How many of you want to be happier? Right? So happiness is hardwired in our DNA. And you know what's the software? Gratitude. If you live with gratitude, you'll be happy. There's actually research to back this. Robert Emmons, best-selling author, he wrote a paperback called Thanks, How the New Science of Gratitude Can Make You Happier. He did a large study. He randomized individuals into two groups. One group, he said, at the end of the day, for the next 6 weeks, write down 3 things you did that day. And the other group, write down 3 things you're grateful for. And the people who expressed gratitude, their happiness quotient went through the roof. You've all heard about IQ. Then there's EQ. You know what's even more important? HQ, happiness quotient. So what are the keys to happiness? The keys to happiness are 4 things, which we talk about in the book. The first one is having a cadre of good friends, right? Your friends are your chosen family. Robert Louis Stevenson said, a friend is a gift you give to yourself. Khalil Gibran said, friendship is a sweet responsibility, never an opportunity. The second attribute is the ability to forgive. Anyone in this audience, if you're holding a grudge, bitterness against an ex, a colleague, a sibling, a neighbor, a friend, my plea, get rid of it. And the moment you get rid of it, you'll feel this enormous weight come off your shoulders. Not easy to forgive. Mahatma Gandhi said, the weak can never forgive. It's an attribute of the strong. Nelson Mandela, 27 years in prison, when he's released, Mr. Mandela, do you harbor resentment against your captors? He said, I have no bitterness, I have no resentment. Resentment is like drinking poison and then hoping it will kill your enemies. There's an amazing scholar and theologian from Germany, Louis Desmedes. He said, to forgive is to set a prisoner free and discover the prisoner was you. How good is that? You're just holding yourself back. Friends, forgiveness. The third is doing things for others. Philanthropy. I define philanthropy as love for humanity. And it's one of 3 T's. It's not just treasure. It's not just writing a check or going to a fundraiser. But if you give your time, give your talent, treasure, time, talent, you're philanthropic. So friends, forgiveness for others, and the 4th one is gratitude, which we already talked about. But happiness is more than the sum total of happy moments. And in order for us to get sustained, enduring happiness, we have to find our purpose and live it. Mark Twain famously said, the 2 most important days in your life are the day you're born and the day you find out why. Each one of us has a singular purpose in life. So Gina mentioned this thing about index cards. So in a workshop I do with another friend, very spiritual, Adrian Wilkins, we gave everyone 33 by 5 cards. Said at the end of the day, write down 3 or 4 things you did that day and give it a rating. Where 1, you were miserable. And 10, if you were lucky, you were in bliss. And then there'll be 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 6, 7, 8, 9 gave you happiness, joy, bliss. At the end of a month, line them up and strike out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Look at 6, 7, 8, 9. You were happy, you were joyous, you were in bliss. You know what? Your purpose is lurking in there. Low-tech way of finding your purpose in life. Sorry for the long answer.
And let me add also, I mentioned daydreaming, and another technique to figure out your purpose is to just take an hour or take a walk and daydream and try to remember when you were young, what excited you? What was your vision? What motivated you? What did you think you might achieve in the world? Or what made you happy? And that's also a path to your purpose. And having a purpose often has to do, as Sanjiv said, for others. It's usually about doing something outside of yourself. But the secret is that most people don't know there's a lot of personal benefit in having a purpose. So people who have discovered their purpose, they tend to have a lot of self-care. They take good care of themselves because they are motivated for this greater cause. But the other thing is, people who have their purpose actually live longer.
Yeah, Saint Francis of Assisi once said, "For it is in the giving that we receive." My favorite quote of his is, "Preach the gospel at all times, if necessary, use words." How good is that, right? Lead by example. There's a story of Gandhi sitting in his ashram, and this mother walks 8 miles in the dust and the heat with her 12-year-old son. She says, "Gandhiji, look at my son. He's gained a lot of weight. He eats a lot of sugar. Would you please tell him not to eat sugar? He adores you. He worships you. He'll do anything for you." Gandhi looks up. He says to the mother and the boy, "Come back in a week." Off they go. A week later, they trudge in the dust and the heat. And Gandhi says to the boy, "Son, don't eat sugar. It's not good for your health." And the boy says, "Gandhiji, from this moment onwards, I have given up sugar." And he leaves the room. Mother stays behind. She says, "Gandhiji, thank you for saying that to my son. Can I ask you a question?" He says, "Sure." "We were here a week ago. You could have asked the same question or told my son the same thing." And Gandhi whispers into her ear, "At that time, I had not given up sugar." Lead by example.
Also, your purpose can change. So you may have had a life purpose when you were young or when you were working, and perhaps you're retired now. And it's perfectly fine to change your purpose as your life evolves. And your purpose can be grand. It could be philanthropically oriented. It could be, and in our book, we list some very grand life purposes and how they came about. But we also interviewed friends of ours and people we knew, and we asked them, "What is your purpose?" And for some, it was watching their grandchildren. There was purpose in that and paying forward that legacy to the future generations. And others said it was tending their garden or just being available for others. So a purpose, when you start thinking about it, does not have to be big. It can be, but it can also be something that's modest and very important and personable to yourself.
So it's clear that you both have, as part of your respective purposes, to do both research and anecdotal evidence and to share your knowledge with the world. How did you find each other and find that you had this commonality to the extent that you decided to put this wonderful book together?
Yeah, go ahead.
So Sanjiv and I, as you heard, both worked together at Harvard Medical School, and then our families became friends. And we started spending time together, and we often talked about happiness, and we also both loved quotations, to the point in the book I'm working on now, my editor said, "Enough quotations, you gotta take them off. We want people quoting you." So we shared that, and one day, Sanjiv actually, and this actually has to do with finding your purpose. When I was young, I had a habit, and I continued this when my children were young, is the night before my birthday growing up and the night before their birthday and the eve of their birthday, I would write like what I remembered, who were my friends, what were the key moments, and what did I envision for myself. And I would ask my children that when they were young and type it in, and I still have all of this. But the night before I was 16 years old, I was writing my traditional thing, but I decided to go farther than the coming year, and I thought I was on the cusp of adulthood, and it was intimidating. What did it look like? And I remember writing about the picture of my life, and I had this office, and what would I do? And I was going to change the world and be politically involved, and I was going to be an author, and I was going to work in areas, and I was going to travel. And years later, when I was talking to Sanjiv, he said to me, "We should write a book together." And I said, "Oh, Sanjiv, you don't need me to write this book," because he's so accomplished. And he said, "You told me once," and I can't believe I told him this because I never really shared this with anyone. It was an old memory. He said, "You told me once that of all of the things you dreamt of when you were young, one of the only things you haven't achieved is writing a book, and I want to help make that happen for you." Yeah.
So that's how it happened. I used to give a talk, and I still do, around the country, different parts of the world. It's called Dharma, Happiness, and Living with Purpose. Dharma is a Sanskrit word that incorporates vocation, moral compass, authenticity, and truth. And if you find your dharma and live it, you'll be happy. So I'd give this talk, it would get a very good response, and almost always the moderator would say, Sanjiv, the first 10 questions are, do you have a DVD on this? Do you have a book on it? So I said, you know what, I'll write a book. And that's when I reached out to Gina and said, write it with me.
And it was fun. We had a lot of fun. It's a very different experience writing a book with someone than writing it alone, but it was an awful lot of fun.
How many of you have written a book? Wonderful.
Oh, awesome.
All right. How many of you have given a TEDx talk? So very few. How many of you are passionate about something in life? Pretty much everyone, right? Everyone has a book in them. Everyone has a TEDx talk in them. Just get going. Don't worry about the sequence, the grammar, which chapter comes first, what quote to put. It'll happen. I serve as a visiting professor in medicine around the country. I was in University of Washington, Seattle, 4 days, multiple talks, meet 10 hepatologists, liver specialists, my field, half an hour, half an hour, half an hour. Talk, lunch, half an hour, half an hour. It's like boot camp from 7 in the morning till 11 at night. And I asked each of the hepatologists, have you written a book? I could sort of predict the answer. No. Have you given a TEDx talk? No. Are you passionate about something? Yes. I said, each one of you has a book in you. I come back 10 months later, 2 of them have written a book.
Yeah.
I said, Sanjiv, you just planted the seed. One of them is from Cyprus. He went to Oxford on a scholarship. Brilliant guy. He's now working at the Seattle Veterans Administration Medical Center. Brilliant hepatologist, liver specialist. And he wrote a book about 18 chapters, lessons he learned from his patients about bitterness, anger, courage, sorrow. I couldn't put the manuscript down. Brilliant. So each one of you has a book in you. It's a legacy for your children, your grandchildren. Could be short. Don't worry about it. You can self-publish if you don't get a publisher. And sometimes those books do better than the best published books.
And I can make it really easy for you because for Christmas, my children gave me something, I think it's called Storyworth, where I don't know if anyone here has done it, and I haven't started it yet, but there are hundreds of questions, and your children or you could choose your own questions. And they ask you, what are your favorite heirlooms? What do you remember about growing up? What was your relationship like with your mother, your father, your siblings? What was the hardest thing in your life? What are you most proud of? And you can choose these questions and write your story. And it's a wonderful legacy to leave for your friends and your family.
Gina just said, write your story. Yeah. Storytelling is an art. And Steve Jobs once said, the most powerful people in the world are storytellers. So what a great statement. If you see a painting 5,000 years ago in a cave, there's the mother cooking the food, the husband is getting the fire, the wood, and the grandfather is sitting there in a semicircle with 3 grandchildren telling stories. So you can improve your storytelling. I work on it constantly. If I've given a talk 50 times, a week before, I spend an hour looking at my PowerPoint presentation. How can I improve it? How can I tell a better story? Actually, one of the 4 books I wrote during COVID lockdown with a new friend and colleague, he's a producer, director, actor, Mexican-American in LA, Rick Najera, is called Ignite the Fire Within, Master Your Speaking and Writing. Lots of stories about how brilliant people have given speeches and how to write. Easy to do.
And if you think you don't know what to write, Joan Didion, who's one of my favorite authors, said, I write to figure out what I think, right? So
Who said that?
Joan Didion.
Huh.
I think other authors said it as well, but I usually quote Joan Didion. But you write to figure out what you think.
This is basically how we all got here, because I started the Writer's Block show with my book. I started with a presentation on how I wrote my book and why I wrote it. Unfortunately, my reason was my late father had gone to Brown University, and it had always been kind of in my mind to write something about that, but then when he was diagnosed with dementia, that kind of put the fuel to the fire. But the rewarding thing about doing this show is I've had a lot of people say, I had an idea, it was always backburnered, but now I've published it. And even if it's just, for yourself, my great uncle had a 40-page memoir that he basically, stapled together for the rest of the family, and I reread it every year. And it's the story of where I came from, and it doesn't have to be New York Times bestseller. It can just be for you, or for a family member. And but I definitely there are so many ways. Like Gina was talking about, the questions, or there are programs online that you really just kind of plug and play the facts, and it just kind of makes the book for you. And self-publishing is such a viable option these days. So definitely. I mean, that's kind of how we all got here. So I'm glad you talked about the process, because obviously that's important.
There's another way people find their purpose, and they witness something horrific, and they have the fortitude, the grit, the compassion, the love to say, this is unacceptable. I'm going to try and make a small dent in here. So I'm going to tell you a story of Papa Jaime, who's my age. I consider him one of my best friends and a mentor to me, a real inspiration. He's from the country Colombia. His name is Jaime Aramillo. 50 years ago, so he's now 70, 50 years ago, he's standing at a street corner in Bogota, and across the street there's a sewer, and these orphans live there. And he's feeling sorry for their plight. A 7-year-old beautiful girl emerges, smiling at him. As they're having this interchange, a car comes around the corner, stops in the middle of the street. The window rolls down, somebody tosses a toy. Yellow school bus, Fisher-Price toy. This girl, 7-year-old girl, beautiful girl, has never possessed a toy. She comes running to the middle of the street, the car recedes. She picks up the toy, she's looking at Jaime Aramillo, beaming with joy. As they're having this interaction, a speeding truck comes around the corner, smashes her into oblivion. And he says to himself, this is my calling in life. I'm going to help these kids. 50 years. He's adopted, house-schooled, and fed 100,000 orphans. 100,000. So he's a national hero, Papa Jaime. I said, Papa, how do you pay for it? How many staff do you have? He said, 150 staff. I have a bakery. The only thing we make is cookies. And I've convinced all the restaurants in Medellin, Bogota, to have a cookie jar next to the cash register. As people are leaving, they grab a cookie. There's a shoebox with a slit. They drop change, $1. I get 50% of my needs that way. I said, what about the other 50%? He said, I'm a motivational speaker. I speak all over Latin America. I plow my honorarium into the foundation. I said, come on, that doesn't cut it. I know what motivational speakers get. So he smiles, he says, you're right. Every time I need money, out of the blue, somebody helps me. He says, 3 weeks ago, I needed $41,000 to pay my bills. I go to 3 banks, they turn me down. Papa, you already got loans with us. At such a low rate, please don't tell anyone. But we can't give you more loans. So he's coming back to the office, and there's a street woman. She crosses the street, gives him a hug, Papa Jaime. He turns to her, he says, are you hungry? Come to the office. So she's sitting in his office, eating cookies and drinking coffee. He's on the phone, calling 3 other bankers. And she can tell that he's being turned on. So she looks at him, she says, Papa, how much money do you need? I said, Sanjiv, I told her I need $41,000. She looks at him, smiles, and says, I give it to you. He said, I said to myself, she's cuckoo. So the street woman, she opened her purse, she had $60,000. Her son had given her the money, she had to go to a bank, deposit it, move into her house. She said, I've saved some other money. The weather's good, I can move later. You need it now, your children need it, take it now. No questions asked. You can return it if you want, when you want. 50 years he's been doing it. So his kids have become professional athletes, a junior national champion of tennis in the country, Colombia. Doctors, artists, nurses, surgeons, computer scientists, and many of them are giving back to the foundation. But he found his purpose in life 50 years ago, witnessing the tragic death of this beautiful 7-year-old girl. He's a saint of a man, absolutely amazing.
So to get to the book itself, now that we've kind of talked about the process, there, positive psychology, Marty Seligman, it's very big. There's entire shelves of it, half of which are your books, admittedly, but there are others. What makes this particular book different in terms of its approach and its message?
Gina, you go ahead.
No.
So if you were to buy our book, and we didn't bring copies of it tonight, but it's full of both practical exercises on how you can be happier, and there's ancient wisdom, and there's poetry to inspire. So it has a lot of philosophies. And for example, I'm going to give you one thing you can do that will make you happier instantly. Now I'm going to give you two. We'll give you more, but right now, the single most important thing you could do right now to be happier is to smile. Seriously, how many times a day do you think children smile? Any guesses?
Hopefully a lot.
400 on average. They've done studies. Children smile 400 times a day. Adults, any idea?
8.
25.
40.
40?
It's 40. And smiling releases the endorphins, and there's this chemical cascade that happens, and it's a gift you pay forward, because if I smile at you and you smile at me, and exponentially, people will pay that forward 90 times. So that's one simple thing you can do. The other thing you can do that's really interesting, and I have to say, I had a habit when I was young. It was something I did for no idea why I did it. As I was falling asleep, we didn't have TVs in our room, I would think about something that happened during the day that was happy. So I would relive a happy memory in my head. Years later, I'm sitting at my desk at Harvard, and this article from researchers from Harvard came across my desk, and there was research that showed people who relive their happy memories are happier, and thus they're healthier, and thus they live longer. So one of the easiest things you could do is when you're falling asleep, think about something happy that happened in your day or in your life. And the next time you're with your friends, reminisce about something fun. Remember that time when we laughed when we were working on the book. But those are just a couple things. And our book is full of exercises and simple little things that you can do that will increase your happiness quotient.
I consider the children to be the modern day philosophers. There's so much wisdom, and you should try this. Ask your nephew or niece or grandchild to complete the phrase, happiness is, and you'll be astounded. They're not going to say sleepovers and birthday parties. So I gave a version of this talk at Assumption College in Worcester, and I share my slides with everyone. When they're taking notes, I said, no, you don't have to take notes. Whoever organized it will give you access to all my slides. You can use them, you can modify them. You don't even have to give me attribution. I call it copy left. So one of the deans wrote to me, and she said, I went over your talk with my husband, really loved it, but I took your cue and asked my 5-year-old daughter, what is happiness? And my 5-year-old daughter immediately answered, Mommy, happiness is when the heart feels bigger. 5-year-old. A 2 years, 10-month-old son of a surgeon at the Beth Israel Deaconess. I gave surgical grand rounds, and then we met for coffee. He said, Sanjiv, my son is not even 3 years. I asked him, what makes you happy? He says, Daddy, I'm most happy when I'm sharing my toys with my friends. And you all know John Lennon, the Beatle, right? He's 5 years of age. He goes to school. And the teacher gives the kids an assignment. Write down what you want to be when you grow up. He writes happy, and he gives it to the teacher. And the teacher says, John, you didn't understand the assignment. And he looks at the teacher and he says, and you don't understand life. 5 years of age. His mother, every time she tucked him into bed, said, John, when you grow up, I want you to be happy. Another myth that there's there is that When I succeed, when I get this new promotion, this job, move into this mansion, get a luxury car, I'll be happy. All right, well, you'll be happy for a short time, 3 months, 4 months. Then you get used to it. This phenomenon is called hedonic adaptation. We're often on the hedonic treadmill. Albert Schweitzer, Nobel laureate, said, success is not the key to happiness. Happiness is the key to success. The ancient Greeks did not use the word happiness. They used a term called eudaimonia, which literally translated means human flourishing. You'll flourish when you're happy.
So Martin Seligman talked about the set point for happiness. And so do you believe it's possible to be happier? Yes? That there are things you can do. And so what we learned from him is that 40% of your happiness quotient is set. It's genetic. And basically, it's through your genetics and your living condition when you were young. And another 10% is related to your living conditions. So it doesn't matter if it's, you live in a mansion or you lived in the slums of Calcutta or you lived in poverty, but your living conditions. But a complete 40% of your happiness quotient is dependent on voluntary actions and things you do consciously to increase your set point. And that's what our book is really about. To go back to Matt's question is, how do you increase that set point?
So we've been introducing a lot of terms, and there's some that I noticed in the book. We've talked about the happiness quotient, we've talked about bliss. Are there distinctions to be made? Are there clarifications, or is it sort of...
Yeah, so I think we should clarify the distinction between happiness, joy, and bliss. So happiness is an internal experience that we express outwardly, right? We often smile. If you're walking down the street and somebody is walking across you and they're looking at their cell phone and they're smiling, you can tell at least at that moment they're happy. Joy is much more intense, much more exuberant, but transient. And bliss has been called perfect joy. It's when we have a sense of connectedness with others and with nature. And if you and I want to witness bliss, all we have to do is go to a playground and look at the 3 and 4-year-olds on the swing and the slides. They're in bliss, not a care in the world. And this 4-year-old trips and he bruises his knee and he's sobbing. Another friend consoles him. 20 seconds later, he's back in bliss. We can learn so much from children, as I mentioned, modern day philosophers. The other group I think that it's amazing is to look at fictional characters and cartoon characters. Look at Snoopy and Charlie Brown. They're sitting watching the sunset. And Charlie Brown says, "We only live once." Snoopy says, "Wrong. We only die once. We live every day." You know, the fictional character Winnie the Pooh and Piglet. Milne wrote that book about 100 years ago. So Winnie the Pooh says to Piglet, "If you live to be 100, I want to live to be 100 minus 1 day, because I cannot live a day without you." How beautiful and sublime is that friendship and love. We can learn so much from all these characters.
When you talked about happiness is, I immediately thought of Your Good Man, Charlie Brown.
Yeah.
It's the simple things. Just one clarification, you talked about reliving a good thing from that. Is that the theory behind the journaling? Like the last thing you write at night is to revisit them? I've had a lot of...
Journaling is certainly one way to do it. You can think it, but when you write things down, whether it's gratitudes or memories, it is taken into your brain in a very different way, and it has much more power and much more meaning. So I would say that. I would also say that there's never been a time in my lifetime that I can think of when we need practices to make us happier, because the world can be very dark at times. There's dissension, And I wrote an article a couple weeks ago for Psychology Today after reading the Sunday paper, and I never got beyond the front page of the New York Times, and it was just so heavy and weighty in my heart. And then I turned to social media, which probably wasn't the best idea, but I stumbled on, is anyone familiar with the Eagles in Big Bear Creek Valley? I've become a little obsessed, and I wrote about them, but the point of it is there are these two eagles, and they have 3 eggs, and we've been waiting for them to hatch, and now I think, right, they're beyond the hatching, which is not a happy end to that story, but you can watch them, and the nest cam is spectacular. But what I wrote about is awe, because one way to be happy is to really be attentive to the beauty in the world. And John O'Donohue, the poet, philosopher, writes so eloquently about that. But being outdoors for even 20 minutes can change your mindset and change your pulse and your heartbeat and your rhythm, and it's inspiring. And so for me, I was using the eagles. I let them live with my computer on permanently on the counter, and I'd watch them come and go, and it's all live. But just to be aware of the beauty in the world and the awe, and pay attention now. The birds are everywhere. They're coming back, and they're at the feeders, and like watching them, it's really quite wonderful.
So what's more heavily weighted, negativity or positivity? Negativity. There's actually Marcel Lusarda, economist, it's called the Lusarda ratio. If I say something negative to Gina or to Matt, I now have to say 3 positive things to neutralize it. And I'm told if I say something negative to my wife, I have to say 6 positive things to neutralize it. So negativity is very heavily weighted. And many of us do affirmations. Any of you do affirmations? Think about them, write them, say something in the morning when you wake up, today will be a great day, I'll be very successful. They have some value. But the best affirmations are the ones you say at night as your head hits the pillow. And there's science to back it up. I have a colleague, Robert Stickgold, in sleep medicine at the Beth Israel Deaconess. He got promoted to a full professor at Harvard Med School. Brilliant guy. Years ago, I'm driving to work at 6:30. He's on NPR talking about his research. I said, oh my God, this guy is brilliant. I pull over. I want to listen. I don't want to miss a beat. And then through my assistant, I reach out to him. I run a conference in Boston at the convention center every October, December. Up to 5,000 clinicians attended. We have keynotes. So I reached out to him and I said, I want you to give a keynote on your research. He's so articulate. He said, what should we call it? I said, let's call it Sleep on It! Exclamation mark. He was brilliant. So here's an affirmation that my spiritual friend Adrian and I teach in a workshop on happiness, and it's in our book too. I expand in abundance, success, happiness, and love. All right, I'll repeat it. I expand in abundance, success, happiness, and love every day, and inspire others as well. When you say inspire others, it's not out of arrogance. It's your duty. Voltaire, the French philosopher, said, every man is guilty of all the good he did not do. He had another great saying, cherish those who seek the truth, but beware of those who find it. Somebody says, I know the truth. Stay away from that person. So it's amazing. If you do this, the brain figures out. If you are thinking of a mathematical or a difficult problem at work, and you think about it just before you sleep, the brain figures it out. There's scientific experiments to prove this.
Which is another reason not to be reading social media before you fall asleep.
So along those lines, from reading some of your other books, Dr. Chopra, one of the takeaways that I've incorporated in my life is your big 5, which is taking a walk, being social and with friends, drinking coffee, eating healthy nuts, and meditating. And if I remember correctly from our previous discussion, you said meditate once a day, and if you don't have time, meditate twice a day.
So I wrote this book called The Big 5, and I did about 20 events on TV, radio. Some were 5 minutes, some were 20 minutes, and I told the moderator a favor at the end, give me 10 seconds to summarize. So the first chapter, 41 pages, is on coffee, all the health benefits. Low risk of 7 common cancers: diabetes, Parkinsonism, Alzheimer's, cirrhosis of the liver, gout, dental cavities, good for bone health, low risk of kidney stones, gallstones. It does all these things. The holy grail would be to men and women who drink coffee live longer. 5 studies. New England Journal of Medicine, Annals of Internal Medicine, Lancet, JAMA, best journals. After I wrote the book, more research came out, so then I wrote a separate book on just coffee. Coffee, the magical elixir, facts that will astound and perk you up. The second is, we all know, exercise. Women with breast cancer who exercise after their treatment have a much lower relapse rate. Exercise mitigates the risk of Alzheimer's. Physical exercise. The third is vitamin D. It's the only vitamin I recommend, unless you're vitamin deficient or you're pregnant, then you need folic acid to prevent neural tube defects. D3, we get it from the sun. The skin makes D1, the liver converts it to D2, the kidney converts it into the active form, D3. Guess what? Kids playing soccer in Florida are deficient in vitamin D. What? Sunshine State. Why? You know the answer. Sunblock. The dermatologists have done a darn good job telling us, which is good. The best dermatologists at Harvard Medical School, at the Brigham, BI, Mass General, etc., they remove a skin cancer, and they don't need to, but they give them a prescription for sunblock, and at the same time, a prescription for vitamin D3. We should all take 2,000 to 4,000 international units a day, over the counter, inexpensive. So coffee, exercise, vitamin D, nuts. And the fifth one is meditation. So when I did about 20 shows, I told the moderator, give me 10 seconds at the end to summarize. And they all did that. I said, here's the deal. On a good sunny day, go for a brisk walk to your favorite Java shop. Now you got the sun, you got the exercise, and the coffee. Don't go nuts remembering this. That's the fourth one. And before you go, meditate. And there's an ancient saying, you should meditate once a day. And if you don't have time to do that, you should meditate twice a day. And they'd meet me 6 months later. Sanjiv, 5 things. They all remembered it. You have to make it fun and easy to remember.
So along those lines, what is the big 5 from this book? What are the 5, let's give our audience a takeaway.
I think the takeaway is friends, friendship, forgiveness for others,
Gratitude.
and gratitude, and finding your purpose. Albert Schweitzer, again, Nobel laureate, he said, I don't know what your destiny will be, but one thing I'm certain of, the ones amongst you who will be truly happy are those who have sought and found how to serve. Right? One of the best ways for us to be happy is to make others happy. The Beth Israel Hospital where I work is a sister hospital of the hospital Albert Schweitzer started with his wife, a nurse in Gabon, Africa. And 15 years ago, we celebrated the centennial. He was an amazing theologian, physician, humanitarian, Nobel laureate. Talk about humility. 1952, at the ceremony, he whispers, now I have to go earn it. Now I have to go earn it, the Nobel Prize. I don't deserve it. And he always believed that reverence for truth trumps everything. He's a prisoner of war. He's going to see a general. He's in a train. The train is crossing a river on a bridge. And he looks down in the river, and there are these hippopotami frolicking, including a baby hippopotamus. And suddenly this German phrase flashes across his mind, Erfurcht von dem Leben, which means reverence, awe. And it hit him. It's not reverence for truth. It's reverence for life. That is the most exalted. If I give you a newborn baby to hold, you cannot put down to protect it. Schweitzer taught us same kind of reverence for a disfigured leper. Paul Farmer, who passed away one of the greatest humanitarians of our time. He had that same kind of reverence for a patient with end-stage HIV/AIDS. Papa Jaime for lepers in Calcutta at Mother Teresa's colony. He went to do acupuncture on Mother Teresa and the nuns, and then she said, "Can you do acupuncture on their 10 lepers?" He said, "Of course." She said, "So wear a hood and double glove." He said, No, I don't do that." And the first leper who came was 30 years of age, woman, with open sores. And he got up and he hugged her for 50 seconds.
And
He
she
stepped
cried.
back, she was crying. She'd never been touched by a human being. And then Mother Teresa calls him and says 6 days later, "What were you doing?" He said, "What was I doing? I did acupuncture and I gave them unconditional love." She said, "All their sores have healed. All 10 of them. They're leaving the colony. They can leave now." I said, "Papa, what were you doing? God's work, Christ's work?" He said, No. Unconditional love, it stimulates the amygdala, the insula, it helps the immune system. I knew chemistry when I was young, I knew immunology. Humble man, nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize.
I would add to Matt's question about our book is, I think, yes to all that Sanjiv said, but I think the other point we would say is that you control your destiny and your happiness. And it's not because you're not going to deal with adversity and loss and aging and difficulties, because we all do. And that, dealing with difficult things in life is, no one is exempt. And so learning how to manage it is as necessary as learning to tie your shoe and work your remote control, right? And that with this book, we want people to know there are very practical things you can do to make yourself happier. And it touches on resilience, because with resilience, you know that you can learn to manage your thoughts, even being aware of what you think. It's the same with happiness and gratitude and community. All of those impact both happiness and your ability to rebound.
And Gina. And thanks to Gina, there's a lot of poetry in the book. She has a poetry club. And some of our favorite sayings, I'm sure many of you have read Rumi, the Sufi mystic. He once said, "The wound is where the light enters you." Wow, the wound is where the light enters you. Hafiz, another great poet, he said, "Does the sun ever say to the earth, 'You owe me'? See what happens with a love like that. It lights up the entire sky." One sentence, two sentences, and they would captivate you.
And then one of my favorites by Mary Oliver, the poet, is she writes, and it's part of my purpose in life, because mine isn't grand really, but she said, "Pay attention, be astonished, tell about it." So be aware and be in your life and be with your community.
Well, I've been doing the 3 Things You're Grateful For journal for the past year, and I can attest to it. And I know that first and foremost tonight will be the honor of their presence and the honor of yours. Thank you, everyone, for coming. We have a email list for people who want to know about the book, because we don't have.
Sure.
They're here.
It's on Amazon.
Okay,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
and food from my sponsors at WBZ, some of my food friends. Any questions for our guests before we close up? Anyone at all? I mean, is it the
Yeah,
book?
there's one.
Oh,
2.
okay.
You mentioned,
No.
you said meditation is one of the things we can do. Can you briefly suggest a meditation or how to do it?
So, what's the difference between meditation and prayer? In prayer, we speak to God. In meditation, God speaks to us. And there are many, many different kinds of meditation. They all work. One of the easiest, which is been taught to 20 million people in the world, is called transcendental meditation, TM. You're taught by a teacher. My wife, who's brilliant, pediatrician, has become a teacher of meditation and teaches at our home over 4 days, 1.5 hours each day. And she doesn't charge. And I told her 5 years ago, I said, I'm glad you don't charge, but you should tell everyone you teach that they should make a donation to a charity of their choosing, whatever amount and whichever charity. And they don't have to tell you, but pay it forward.
Can I add to that? I would like to share, I did not meditate, and when we were working on this book, I was just I had a job that was 24/7. I was traveling everywhere, all over the world. And Sanjiv, I would show up every week and it would be, what did you do what you were going to do? And I said, no. And he, with his friend Adrian that he mentioned, had a little intervention. And they said, Amita is going to teach you meditation, which she did. And it was a matter of weeks with regular practice. Everything became clear. And I don't know why. I didn't get more hours in the day, but it really put the priorities in order. And it really, I was able to write the book.
So there's a wonderful book written by Rob Roth, who heads the David Lynch Foundation. You know, David Lynch in Hollywood. His goal is to teach every child in our country meditation. And Rob Roth has taught for 45 years. If you meet him, you'll see the bliss in his eyes, another like a saint. And he's taught the likes of Katy Perry
that we all read on meditation. We could tell them.
Oprah Winfrey, but he's
Transcendent.
most proud of having taught veterans with PTSD for free,
Who wrote it?
teaching prisoners. And the title of the book is Strength in Stillness. Strength in Stillness. So many different kinds of meditation work.
So a book we read was Transcendence. Do you remember the author?
Norman Rosenthal.
Norman Rosenthal. And it explains the health benefits of meditation and how it increases your telomere length. And you can actually, people with longer telomeres actually live longer and have fewer issues with dementia and Alzheimer's. And it's a phenomenal book.
Any other questions?
There was one.
There's another one.
Thank you.
Thank you for this. It's been wonderful. Have you put any of these ideas and practices into place with either patients or medical students around resilience and gratitude?
Yeah, you know, scores of medical students and senior faculty at Harvard Medical School, Harvard Business School have learned meditation. Some of the oncologists, when they're treating their patients with cancer, will say, you should also learn meditation. It also helps the immune system. As Gina mentioned, it lengthens the telomeres. Telomeres are at the end of our chromosomes. They prevent the chromosomes from fraying and sticking to each other. Shortened telomeres are linked with accelerated cellular aging. We have shortened telomeres, and you can measure the enzyme telomerase in the blood, in the white cells. So who has shortened telomeres? Mothers of chronically severely disabled children, stressed day in, day out. Caregivers of people with Alzheimer's. Not the person with Alzheimer's, he or she is clueless. And who has longer telomeres? People who exercise. Again, physical exercise, even walking. Mediterranean diet, meditation, and coffee. If you drink coffee, you have longer telomeres.
Comes back to coffee.
Elizabeth Blackburn got the Nobel Prize in Medicine or Physiology with two other colleagues in 2009, brilliant Australian scientist, for her work on telomeres. And she's actually studied meditators and shown get longer within 6 weeks. Pretty amazing.
Excuse me, can it be decaf coffee?
Yes, it turns out decaf coffee also has benefits, not as robust as regular. So I was interviewed by, you may have heard of Nicole Estefan, award-winning, Emmy award-winning producer, reporter for Chronicle, ABC. And she sent me a text, Sanjiv, I'm doing a segment on coffee, are you interested? I said, Nicole, I wrote a book. Let me send it to you. So she came home, interviewed me, and then she's got 9 other people on the show. It's been aired 5 times. And she has me at the start and at the end. And then at the end, she even puts up my book, which I never expected her to do. Then she says, final question, Sanjiv. What's the best way to have coffee? I said, Nicole, the best way to have coffee is to have coffee with a friend. That went viral. I said, no, I'll give you the scientific answer. If you don't have diabetes, you can add milk, cream, sugar. Never, never, never artificial sweeteners. Nobody should be drinking a Diet Coke. Increases the risk of stroke and heart attack threefold. Changes the gut microbiome. So decaf coffee, the most recent study, patients with advanced stage 4 colon cancer, cancer of the large bowel. Stage 4 means the worst, spread to the liver, peritoneum, lymph nodes, who drink coffee, including decaf coffee, have improved disease-free survival, published in JAMA Oncology, and dose-dependent, which adds credibility to a study. In other words, 4 cups better than 3, 3 better than 2, 2 better than 1. I drink 3 to 4 cups, regular, black, and I finish it before 2 o'clock, otherwise I'll be up all night. Voltaire, the French philosopher, guess how many cups of coffee he drank? He lived to 83 when life expectancy was in the 40s. And it's not proof that he lived that long because he drank a lot of coffee. 50 cups of coffee a day. People ask me what size. I said, how does it matter? Even if it's this much, 50 adds up to a lot. Jefferson drank a lot of coffee. Teddy Roosevelt drank a lot of coffee. His grandson said, Grandpa's coffee mug is so large, it's akin to a bathtub.
I have one more question. Are there cultures that are happier than other cultures?
Yeah, you go ahead.
So, you may have read the US just fell off the worldwide happiness list
Oh, yes, I did.
recently, but Finland is definitely one of the happiest. And I don't know if you saw the studies that women across the world, no matter what their economic status, are happier than men.
So one of the happiest countries year in, year out, either number 1 or 2, last 2-3 years it's been Finland, but often it's been Denmark. And I've had the good fortune of traveling to Copenhagen. They work 30 hours a week. They have free medical care, free education. They partake in a social phenomenon called hygge, which we have in the book, which is informal gathering of friends. So if I'm in Alan's neighborhood, I don't call him and say, Alan, are you home? I simply ring the doorbell. And he opens it, oh, Sanjiv, come on in. And you sit by the fireplace, you have hot chocolate, and you talk about life. Also happens in Norway. The other amazing thing in Denmark is between the ages of 6 and 16, when kids go to school, every week there's a mandatory 1-hour interactive session. Every week, let's say 30 weeks a year, for 10 years, 300 times. On what? Empathy. They're teaching young children tolerance. They have the first Museum of Happiness in Copenhagen. It opened 2 months after I came back. I'm going to go back. And there's a country in the foothills of the Himalayas, you may have heard of it, Bhutan. The ruler said 35 years ago, we don't care about GDP, we care about gross happiness product. They have a Ministry of Happiness. They track everyone's happiness level each year with the goal of improving it. Pretty amazing.
Thank you.
Anyone else? I'd like to thank our guests again. Thank you all for coming. Hope to see you next time.